Welcome to the Homeschool High School podcast, brought to you by Seven Sisters Homeschool.com and the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. I'm Vicki, and I am so excited today to bring you my friend Erin Bradford. So I want to tell you about Erin and living history, and I'm going to start with the story. So say hi, Erin.
Hello.
So back in the day when Erin was still in high school, I think, he loved history and he wanted to share the joy of history with the younger people. And so he invited other homeschoolers to come out with him and do Revolutionary War reenactments. And he taught elementary homeschoolers, drills and marching and gave them little history lessons as they went. So my kid number 4 at that time was in elementary school, and he went every time Erin did something. He went to the reenacting, and he got involved in all kinds of reenacting things as a little guy. And he got such a love of history because he found out that history was real and that things happen and real people were part of history. And he grew up and he now teaches middle school history to teach young people to love history as well. Isn't that neat?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the fruits of your labor. So anyway, we're going to talk today about living history and the things that Erin is still carrying on. But first, okay, this just popped into my head. Erin, will you please tell our audience who your ancestors are?
Certainly. So, when I was a young lad growing up, I heard rumors about possibly being descended from Governor William Bradford, who sailed over on the Mayflower in 1620, and who then was elected governor of Plymouth Colony. William Bradford also wrote a book called Of Plymouth Plantation, and he's sometimes known as America's first historian. And so, I had heard rumors about possibly having that connection, but when we went up to Plymouth and we walked the ground where that happened, we got to see in the records that I'm 13th direct generation descendant from William Bradford. So that immediately made history personal. And the great thing about history is everyone comes from somewhere. And so therefore, everyone has a connection with history. And it's just such a blessing to know what that history is. I have a dear aunt who's done an incredible amount of research and genealogy. So it's such a blessing to be able to have that. But that made history very personal at a young age.
It certainly did. And then you married someone with historical connections as well.
Yes, right? Indeed. Yes. My wife is descended from John Alden, who married Priscilla Mullins. So we have 2 Mayflower passengers that we're connected with.
That is so fun. It's like in the way God runs the universe, he must have had fun putting you guys together. Anyway, Erin, a lot of people are not familiar with living history. And one of the things that's important to us as homeschoolers, especially with the high schoolers, they're earning credits and we want them to love what they're learning. And so if they can experience history as something real, living history and log hours doing that, that can work towards their high school credits. But for all of our kids, like my little guy who did the reenactments with you, living history is something that can really change how they love learning. So could you explain a little bit about living history and your career?
Certainly. So when I was growing up, I had a fascination with history. And so what that manifested itself as would be driving by local parks and saying, oh, that bridge reminds me of this bridge from this particular battle, or that terrain or that ground. And so learning the story of these different battles and different generals and different leaders and seeing a canvas, as it were, then that gave opportunity to have an outlet for learning. So one thing that's been such a joy as a father is to have one of my sons look at me one day and say, Daddy, I'm not a bookworm, I'm a book dragon, because he loves reading so much.
Oh my goodness.
So that's one of the great things about history is, as you said, history is about the lives of stories about people. It's not dusty names and dates and things that happened, but rather it's about individuals. So if you can connect with individuals and follow the arc of their lives, and as God has brought and orchestrated those lives together, we can admire his providence. So that can strengthen our faith and our trust in him. And so growing up in a young age, I was able to see that and have an outlet for it. But then as far as career goes, at a young age, I got some friends together and we wrote a 25-minute long living history play. And the setting was in a Union Sergeant's recruiting office. And so we go into a classroom and treat a class of students as the new recruits waiting for the captain to show up. And then a Union soldier would bring in 2 Confederate prisoners, and the Union sergeant would try to convince them to sign the oath of allegiance to the Union. So they started arguing back and forth a bit, and then a couple of ladies came in as well as a chaplain. And so we were to bring in some of the different causes and beliefs and perspectives, 9 different perspectives of people who were there at the time. And so after they were in this Union Sergeant's recruiting office, I did a quick uniform change and came back as a captain. Then we marched and drilled. We also had a classroom from the area where we held a spelling bee. One of the friends, he actually recited a poem by Longfellow. So we had some recitation. They got to learn calligraphy, writing with pen and ink. We also played historic games, and then we would reenact a battle. So we had a group of friends called the Bonnets and Bayonets, and we were able to share love for history.
I remember y'all doing that.
Okay, yes. We were able to basically go from the large children's reenactments to have a group of about 8 of us or 10 of us or so.
Yes.
We'd go around into local Christian schools and share that. We also at Hagley Museum started a program in the summers where we would pick a theme, and each day we would have something to eat so you could taste the history. We also had make and take activities so you could take home history. We brought to life the community that lived on Blacksmith Hill for the DuPont Powder Works at Hagley Museum.
Yes.
So as my friends moved on to other things, then I was able to continue that with my family at a Delaware Hands-on History program, which had a giant canvas map and flags and walked through 10 different time periods of Delaware history. We also did it in some of the other states as well. But after I graduated from the University of Delaware with a degree in history education, I then moved down to Virginia. And at Virginia, I worked at a private historical park that was 422 acres.
Wow.
We had the National Museum of the Civil War Soldier, but we also had an 1812 era plantation and then about half a mile of original Confederate earthworks as well. So I worked there for about 5.5 years. I met my wife at a Christmas social in 1863, as we like to say. She was coming up. We had a mutual friend in Delaware who introduced us. And so I met her. I was living in Virginia. So she moved up from Georgia once we got married, and we lived in Virginia. And then moved down to Savannah, Georgia, and worked at another private historical park, which operated 6 different historic sites in the Savannah area. But then COVID-19 happened. And for the first time in my life, I was then furloughed. And so I was able to go to a state historic site. And one of the most extraordinary things about that was to take my sons with me. So being an interpretive ranger, I would go in for the day and portray a soldier of General Oglethorpe defending Georgia from the Spaniards, but I could take my sons in with me as well. So I was a part-time park ranger there. And then the Lord called me to teach at a private Christian school, which uses the principal approach method. And 2 summers ago, I moved back up here. So it's been a journey, but I just realized recently doing the math that it's been about 30 years now since I started doing those children's reenactments with your son.
3 decades.
Yes.
How did you get old enough for that? But that's the gift that living history has brought so many children and adults who've seen you bring, like reenacting, eating food or playing games or explaining characters of history, has made history understandable to so many people. So we want to encourage homeschoolers to know that Aaron's not the only person in the world who is bringing living history. Like, history happened. There were real people. They were living real lives. And if kids get a taste of that and teens get a taste of that, it can help them have a perspective on our past and also where we're going, because our past helped shape us where we are now.
Absolutely.
So,
one of my favorite quotes was from a participant from a children's reenactment. And I have to paraphrase this, but in a word, he said, essentially, now I understand something I could have never understood in a million years otherwise. The idea that when you're walking their shoes and you get their perspective, and their cares, their concerns, you consider their sacrifices and the decisions that they make, and then also their faith and their conviction and what allowed them to get through. Going back to Hagley Museum, we actually researched the census records, and so we got to learn the names of the families and the children and their ages who lived on Blacksmith Hill. So one of my fond memories is playing 19th century baseball, And we would be calling out to each other by the names of the children who were there on the hill, because we would take on that persona, that character. So we were able to remember them and to, in a way, continue that community, as it were. So recently, speaking at a Pennsylvania homeschool convention, my oldest son was able to come with me for this. And so I asked him, why is history important? And my other son, he was asked that question too. He said the idea about how freedom is not free and sacrifices have been made. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about living history, is you cannot help but be moved to be grateful.
Yes.
One time we were in a film called Gods and Generals about the American Civil War.
Were you in that?
Yes. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
That's another thing, that because I had uniforms and equipment and I had experience living history, when they put out a call for people to fill the ranks, you had to send in a picture of yourself in your different uniforms. So I was able to go while I was senior in high school, actually. I was there for 40 days of filming total. Sometimes I'd volunteer on the weekends, but other times I was actually paid to be part of the core company that could be there during the week.
Oh my goodness.
But we sprinted about 800 yards portraying Stonewall Jackson's flank attack to the Union Army at the Battle of Chancellorsville. So we're wearing wool. It's in the late fall, so it's still pretty humid in Virginia. And one of our friends was making a documentary, and so he panned and said, "Why are we doing this? We're exhausted. We have to drive back." A number of my friends were UPS drivers at the time, so we got to be up at 4:00 in the morning to get on the truck. Why are we doing this? And one of them said jokingly, "I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm not quite right in the head." And we all chuckled. My father said, "Because of what they did." And so it was just, I'll never forget that. The idea that, yes, we were exhausted, we were bone tired, we were having fun, but I'm sure at that moment in time, we would have wished we were doing something else. But again, you just gain such an appreciation for what they did. So there's a way to honor and remember those who've gone before us as well.
Yeah, there's lessons to learn from history that we can only understand by experiencing some of that. I know my son, who did the reenacting with you, learned fife to play the fife, and so he had like a whole experience of not just marching drills, but the music, and to play the music of the time. It wires your soul in a way of like, we have a story and we're part of this long story, and what do we want to do with that? So for him, he wanted to keep sharing the story. So tell us these days how you are still sharing the story of history and helping it to come alive for people.
All right. Well, in Delaware's colonial capital, which is Newcastle, last summer we were able to pilot and successfully launch a history adventure walk. And so we start out on the Delaware River by the historic site of Fort Casimir. We've got a canvas map and flags, and we walk through some of the early settlement, and then we marched into Newcastle, go to Packet Alley and see the beautiful George Reed II house. And then we're able usually to go inside the 1707 Presbyterian Meeting House. And so to sing a hymn and to consider the convictions of those and understand God's design for liberty is a wonderful venue to be able to have some great teaching there. We then go by William Penn's statue and we swashbuckle, as we consider piracy in Newcastle.
Because it was a thing.
Indeed, that's right. That's one of the reasons why Delaware actually started in 1704 having our own separate legislature from Pennsylvania, because those pacifist Quakers up there felt like they were not protecting our life, liberty, and property from the threat of piracy, which was a problem, as you said. Yes,
I remember going to a living history field trip where they talked about pirates in our part of the country. Love living history. So and so then we go in front of the 1732 courthouse. We read excerpts of the Declaration of Independence. We also have a bucket brigade, considering how you would protect from the threat of fire in the colonial era. And then we conclude on the green and relive the role of the Delaware Continentals at the Battle of Cowpens in the American Revolution with Robert Kirkwood. So it's about a 2-hour long adventure walk, we call it, because we're interspersing hands-on activity with thoughtful reflection and discussion. And so, as you said, to be able to learn the fife and to learn the music and sing the songs that they were singing is a powerful way to connect with history. Absolutely.
So that's one thing we offer. This summer, we're very excited to launch a Patriot Soldier Life History Adventure Camp, where instead of more or less a walking tour. The
Mhm.
idea is that we are immersed in the War for Independence.
Mhm.
We portray a detachment of Delaware Continentals, and then we play historic games. But then we go through the march and drill and relive several of the pivotal battles where the Delaware Continentals participated
Mhm.
during the American Revolution. This is also within view of Iron Hill and the Cooch's Bridge battlefield.
That's right. That's right in our area.
Yes,
Yes.
the only battle that was fought on Delaware
Mhm.
soil during the
Mhm.
Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
So we're very excited about that.
What age group are you looking at for that?
It's recommended for ages 7 and older,
Mhm.
but families are welcome. So it's really designed for parents to understand
Mhm.
who it's designed for. But we've had children in strollers attend. We really trust parents to use their judgment with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really designed for families.
That is a wonderful way to experience history. So if you're on vacation and coming to the East Coast, give connection information. How would people find you to connect with them?
Great, thank you. So we have a website called libertyencounters.com. What you can do is you can subscribe and unsubscribe at any time if you wish, but we can give you updates. Being a full-time teacher right now, we have a window of time during the summer. Our goal is to expand and periodically offer them, perhaps on Saturdays during the school year itself. But to sign up for our mailing list, we also have some free educational resources that we can share with you about ways to connect with your family history, and also links to historical songs with the lyrics as well. The one last thing I'll share, as far as living history opportunities, is that my father has committed much of his life to learning and memorizing word for word those words that William Bradford painstakingly wrote down.
Yeah.
In an age before laptops and computers and editing, Bradford did that. And so we've got a presentation for the American 250th called Pilgrim to Patriot. And so I come out as a colonist, and I am able to kind of set the stage and also describe how the Pilgrims illustrated the distinctive American principles of freedom, virtue, and faith. But my father then is able to come out and give object lessons through the words of the Pilgrims themselves to show how the Pilgrims set the example when it comes to freedom, with the Mayflower Compact, for example. How the Pilgrims showed example with virtue, how they were virtuous to one another and also to their Native American friends with Massasoit and with Wampanoag. And then finally, how the Pilgrims illustrated their faith. And so that's a presentation we've offered online as well as in person. And it's just so rich and full of many wonderful lessons to learn.
I have seen your dad at conferences, at least doing part of that in his pilgrim attire, and then watching you and your sons in your Revolutionary War attire, making presentations. So they also do homeschool conferences. So those of you guys who are planning things can get in touch with Liberty Encounters. So, all right, and also you guys are working a little bit toward having more things online. So want to drop some hints about that.
Yes. Well, thank you. Well, I worked in Savannah, Georgia, which is the colonial capital of Georgia, for about 12 years. And before I left, after giving tours throughout the historic district and at Colonial Wormslow and other sites, I wanted to be able to capture that history in a way that people could connect with. So we've actually done the filming for about 34 chapters, as it were, of a colonial Georgia unit study. So we're in the process of being able to make that accessible and turn that into a unit study. On a much kind of smaller scale is the idea of looking at courage and how the Patriots demonstrated courage through some hands-on participatory lessons. So that's another thing that we're looking at expanding as well.
So keep an eye on Liberty Encounters, and we'll have more information about that. And for those of you guys who have high schoolers, like any living history kinds of things you do, or if you checked out some of the things that Aaron has to offer, you log hours on that and you work towards credits in a living kind of way. And teens come out with very meaningful like American history credits. Really, 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 or if they're leveling up a traditional credit using a textbook and, oh my gosh, this is so boring, add some living history and it makes a more powerful high school credit. So check out Liberty Encounters. For those of you guys who are watching on YouTube, we'll put the links in the comments. So Aaron, thank you so much for joining us.
Vicki.
So this has been Aaron Bradford with Liberty Encounters, and my great gratitude for the investment he made in my kid number 4 years ago, and the work that he is continuing to do today. So, and this has been the Homeschool High School Podcast, brought to you by SevenSistersHomeschool.com and the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. Thank you to Seth Tillman for editing, and we'll see everyone next week.